When disasters strike, restoration professionals are often among the first to respond. But what if we started the conversation much earlier? Disaster preparedness isn't just about recovering after a loss, it's about helping communities, businesses, and property owners become more resilient before a crisis occurs. In this episode of RA Beyond, we're exploring how the restoration industry fits into the broader disaster preparedness picture. And to do this, it's my pleasure to welcome a first time guest, Chuck Lane, to the program. Chuck, thank you for being here.
Yeah, Jeff, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you've worked with RA on different projects, but for this episode, what is it we need to know about Chuck?
Yeah, sure. Chuck Lane, about 20 years of emergency management experience, primarily on the healthcare side of things. Did spend 7 years directly in the disaster restoration industry, working for one of the larger firms, running their training and development program. And so have spent a lot of time working with the RIA on education initiatives. But I've also spent since 2018 a lot of time as an instructor for FEMA at their Center for Domestic Preparedness in Alabama. So emergency management, response recovery is a huge passion for me and it's something I've dedicated a career to. Excited to share some thoughts today.
This will be great. This is definitely your world. So let's get right to our questions.
Sure.
Thinking about our topic today, restoration professionals see the consequences of disasters every day. So, from your perspective, Chuck, what are some of the most common preparedness gaps you encounter before a loss occurs?
I think there's two sides to look at this, and I'll talk about the restoration side of it a little bit for the business piece. But, on the client side, what I've dealt with a lot over the years is what I kind of call the one bad day syndrome, is that so many of our events that occur are high risk but very low probability, right? They're usually things that we read about that happen to other people, but they don't happen to us. And then all of a sudden, when it does happen to us, the glass ceiling is shattered, right? And now we're all of a sudden scrambling to figure this out, and we're realizing the plans weren't really there the way we needed them to be. The phone numbers weren't in the book or in somebody's cell phone. I don't really know who to call, and that tends to spiral into a lot of other things. Insurance is a big one, right? It as a business, even on the personal side, but the number of people who I think don't truly understand what their insurance covers, or what that looks like, or who they need to call when something happens. We talk about it all the time when the fire happens or the water is pouring out of the ceiling at 3 o'clock in the morning. Most of us that are in leadership positions in businesses, maybe we know who to call, but does your person on site at 3 in the morning on Saturday know who to call? And the longer, obviously, that water runs, or, the smoke sits, the soot gets into places, the more difficult it is to clean up. So I think on the client side, the biggest thing is being prepared to look at, okay, what are our risks? And what would we do if this did occur? So if we did have a leak, or we do have a pipe burst because we have a freeze event or something of that nature, do people know where to go to turn the utilities off? It's really the small common things that create bigger losses and bigger issues over time. As far as preparedness on the restoration side, I think again is being ready to roll. Are your teams prepared to go out and do what they need to do? Are your trucks ready to go? Is the equipment there? Because again, time matters, right? The details matter of things. So the more your equipment is staged, the more stuff is ready to roll out, the better you're going to be. And practice the basics, right? Most of the time under stress in any sort of disaster situation, fine motor skills go out the window, right? Tempers flare, that stress builds. And so all the things that we take for granted when we have time kind of become more difficult. So I think the preparedness piece is understanding that these events do happen. While they're highly unlikely, you want to at least go, okay, if this were to ever happen, I know that I've got a plan for it. I know that I've got some things locked down, and now I can move on and take care of it if it were to happen to me.
Kind of a side point, Chuck. I have found that when you really prepare for something and it doesn't happen, maybe it's because you prepared. I don't know if
Yep.
that's karma or what. I bought a big generator once because of power going out during storms, and of course, nothing's happened since then.
Yep. I look at it as, insurance is one of those things we talk about a ton.
Yeah,
And if you pay for it and you have it, you really hope that you never use it, right?
right.
And the preparedness piece is the exact same, and you hit on it, right? I go back to I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it, right? And
Yep.
generators are a perfect example. But there's something to be said for, I think, if you have some preparedness, you have plans, you have equipment, you've trained for something, it usually seems like it was less of a big deal, or you have a sense of pride in that even though this was bad, we performed well. For people who have sat in any of my classes over the years that listen to this or see this, they'll probably recognize this quote. I'm a huge movie guy, and there's a quote from the movie, it's the King Kong movie, Skull Island, and one of the characters says, it was an unconventional encounter with no tactical precedent. We did the best we could. And so, even though they weren't really prepared for what happened, training kicked in, they did what they could. And so, I think that's a really great quote to think about. The more planning we have and the more we do think about unconventional encounters, we'll perform better. And so, sometimes it lessens the impact of it, which makes it seem maybe as not of a big deal, depending on what it is.
I think we like some of the same movies, but that's a whole nother side point there. So let's ask this question. Many organizations view, maybe I shouldn't say many, but some view disaster preparedness as an emergency management issue rather than a business continuity issue. Do you think that's fair? Should that mindset change?
I think the mindset should definitely change. And I do think it's fair, and I don't think it's with any malicious intent. I think, as business owners, there's 1,000 different things that pull us in a million different directions, right? Even in my current role, I have emergency management and security responsibilities for several healthcare facilities. So it's very easy sometimes because security incidents happen more often to get your focus pulled, right? So if you think about a business where you're dealing with all the things that go into that, putting resources and time, which time is a resource that we can't get back, you put that into emergency preparedness and you're kind of like, well, I'm not seeing any ROI on this. All right. Unless something happens. And then we always kind of see the churn after that. I think where the rubber meets the road with this is to look at your risks, right? So we talk a lot about risk assessments and hazard vulnerability analysis and emergency management. But as a business owner, I think you owe it to yourself, to your team, to look at things and go, okay, these are potential risks for us. And this is a risk to our staff. It's a risk to our business model. So putting a little bit of effort into planning for the unlikely events may help us recover if something were to happen. And I think the split between is it emergency management responsibility versus business continuity. Keep in mind that most of your emergency management agencies, law enforcement, fire, all these different groups, they're dealing with the entire community. And initially, especially in the early days of a large scale community disaster, so floods, wildfires, hurricanes, tornadoes, things of that nature, we're all focused on life-saving measures, right? We're just trying to get people safe, keep infrastructure running. So a business is not really necessarily what we're focused on unless that business is critical infrastructure. So as a business owner, what you really want to be thinking about is, okay, the first few days, few weeks is going to be up to me. It's going to be dealing with, my vendor that I utilize to come in and help me stabilize this incident. But you owe it to not only yourselves and your staff, but you owe it to the community because as a business being part of the community, I think the number, it's probably changed over the past few years, but the often touted number was about 40% of businesses that close during disasters don't reopen. So if you have a large community event or even a major catastrophic event in your facility and you're not prepared for it, and you don't open up, that's an impact on you, it's an impact on your staff, and it's an impact on the economy of the communities that you work in and serve. There's a couple examples here where I'm at where we had a very large tornado come through and one business reopened and the other didn't. And for a small rural community, that was a huge loss, a lot of jobs that couldn't be absorbed. So I do think it's beneficial to look at business continuity, look at emergency action plans. You know, there's general requirements from OSHA anyway that you have them, but really look at if we were no longer in business, not only the financial impact of losing, our livelihoods, but what's the impact to the community? What's the impact to our clients and everything else? And if you think about it that way, that ROI makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, it takes the responsibility as a business owner to a higher level, it sounds like to me.
Yep, absolutely.
So you mentioned a tornado or an example there, but other examples, major disasters you've experienced, any other lessons you would like to share from those events that could help businesses and communities become more resilient before the next one happens?
Yeah, I think it goes back to a lot of what we've talked about is that, again, the mindset of it won't happen here, because you do see a lot where uh, peace is kind of the enemy of memory is a quote that I've always stuck with because the longer you go without something happening, the more it is to just kind of disregard it, right? And, we look back a lot of times on some major hurricanes, but like here in our area, we've had a lot of floods. We get tornadoes pretty often. So it's easy to get buy-in for something like that because they happen pretty frequently. But we've talked for years throughout the Midwest and the Mid-South about the potential to have another major earthquake, like we had along the Mississippi River in 1811, 1812. It's a subset of the community that's like it'll probably never happen again in any of our lifetimes. And there's another subset that's like it's going to be tomorrow, right? And so realistically, yeah, who knows is the best guess. But the lessons I've learned, even just in my personal life, is again when you do prepare to use your generator story, right? When you do prepare and you have it, there's a peace of mind that comes with it. And if you think about really basic things that most of us do, that we designate beneficiaries, we carry insurance, we have wills and trusts, and we do a lot of these things because we all hope like nothing's going to happen to us tomorrow or in the next few years, but we look around and go, okay, it does happen, right? And so I think if we start looking at emergency planning, not just for these big dramatic events, but looking at it as more like a day-to-day thing of, well, I want to be prepared if this were to happen. And so what do we need to look at and what do we need to do? I think most people will find that you can simplify it and it doesn't have to be really as convoluted or complex as sometimes we can make emergency planning. And it can be very overwhelming to people. And I tell people all the time, writing a good emergency plan should be bullet points that anybody can implement at 3 o'clock in the morning. And that to me is starting there to put some things down is a lesson. The other piece I would say is communication. A lot of stress in events comes from people just not knowing who to call and a simple communications plan or having a number in a cell phone before you need it, having the partnerships. The restoration industry talks a lot about partnerships, and I think it's very true, right? We talk about on the emergency management side, you need to know who to call before you need them. And so building those contacts, building those relationships, when you don't have something going on is one of the biggest things I think more people could spend time doing.
All right, thank you. So, where does the restoration industry, the world of RAA, have an opportunity to play a larger role in preparedness, mitigation, and education?
Yeah, so I think there's three key things. The first one being the education piece of getting in front of clients and saying, "Hey, here's what you should be looking at," and sharing some case studies. I hate to say sharing the horror stories, but when you see things like, here was a loss that could have been this bad, but it was now this bad because nobody knew where to go to turn the water off. Or there was nobody there monitoring the building after hours, so the water ran for a day, right? Sharing those things to get people thinking. Usually I find the stories that are somewhere in the middle are the best. If it's too catastrophic, we get the one bad day, like, it's probably not going to happen here, right? That's a fluke. If it's, not dramatic enough, it doesn't hold attention, right? So you need to find the ones that are in the middle. But the education piece on helping clients develop emergency plans, helping them design response protocols, helping them build out communication lists, and building the relationship through education there, I think is a big opportunity. The second thing I think goes back to what I said earlier on our side is whenever a restoration contractor is showing up, we need to sort of show out too, right? I say we because I'm still transitioning out of the industry, but anytime that we're responding to something, no matter what our profession is, people always want to see the best showing up, right? And so the way equipment is maintained, the way communication is done before, during, and after an event are critical. So I think there's things that can be done each and every time to show not only are we as industry professionals telling you to do this, but this is what we're going to do to solve the problem when we show up, and that level of preparedness there. The third piece, I think, as far as mitigation goes, is the before the event, even something like building that relationship of doing a site walk with a client, and just pulling some from some things I've done over the years working with different clients, especially in rural areas or, working in like the healthcare side, like long-term care and nursing homes and things of that nature, assisted living. They may not have a dedicated emergency planner. They may not have somebody that is very familiar with this or understands all the different things that go with this. So maybe working with them, working with their facilities management folks, property managers, whoever it is, to go, hey, could we come out and do a site walk? And, let's identify where your utilities are at and maybe talk about some things of, hey, do you have plans for this? Do you know who would go shut off water? Do you know who would respond? Like, do you know the dangers of, even if you have a small fire where smoke migrates and where soot sits behind wall cavities, things of that nature? Educating people on the mitigation side of things, really, like what do you need to do before, but then also what are we going to do to keep this from getting worse? Some of the most simple things I think the industry takes probably for granted, about how quick mold grows and simple things. A lot of people just don't know, and they're not aware of it. They don't think about it on the day to day. So it ties into the education piece, but that would be my key takeaways is educate as much as you can. Talk people through the mitigation process, quite literally, of what that's going to look like, work with them, help them. But then if you're working with clients and you want that business and you want to be prepared, show up and show out, right? Show them why they hired you and do the best job that you absolutely can for them. And that's going to be beneficial to everyone.
All right, last question. Toughest one ever. If you could give facility managers, property owners, business leaders one piece of disaster preparedness advice today, what would it be and why? One.
Dedicate the time. Quite simply, I could say dedicate the time to planning and education. If you sit down, write a plan, educate people on that plan, and your team has a clear understanding of what they need to do, you're in a lot better position than most organizations out there simply because you've dedicated the time.
A simple answer, but a lot to that because time is number one resource.
That's exactly it. Can't make any more of it.
Chuck, appreciate your time today. We'll see you at a trade show or somewhere down the road.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate you having me on.